With tears in her eyes, Zara realized the man she was about to marry was telling his best man that he wished she were less dark and looked more like someone who would suit a wedding dress. He laughed with his friend about how he would endure her family's presence for just a few hours before they left for their own side of town. Even worse, he admitted that this marriage was all part of his plan to look good in front of his boss, who was known for donating large sums to causes that supported different communities. He mocked the way her father spoke, scoffed at her mother's traditional headscarf, and confessed that he felt out of place around her family. With a smirk, he claimed he was doing her a favor by marrying her. His friend cackled, and the groom joined in. Zara pressed a trembling hand against her mouth, struggling not to cry out. Her veil brushed against the door as she leaned closer, desperate to understand how the man who once claimed to love her could speak such hateful words. "It's just a small sacrifice," the groom said with a casual shrug. "Once we're hitched, I can keep her in line. Everyone will see me as open-minded for marrying someone from a different background, especially my boss. I get a promotion, and she gets what she's always wanted, a decent husband." His friend snickered. "Better you than me, man. I can't stand them. I wouldn't trust one of them alone with my kids. So, you're sure you're ready for this? It might be tough once she moves in." The groom sighed, almost bored. "I'll figure it out. I'll buy her family off if I need to. They can barely make ends meet. I'll put them on a tight budget so they can't embarrass me. But hey, we all have to make compromises. Mine is just bigger, marrying someone different, but it's worth it to impress my boss." Zara closed her eyes, forcing herself to keep listening. She wanted to burst into the room, to scream, to confront him, but her feet wouldn't move. She was frozen, pinned in place by betrayal. The conversation continued, each word stabbing her heart like a sharpened blade. The men joked about how gullible she was, how she actually believed in love, how she thought he saw her and her family as equals. They claimed she was naive, and that it worked perfectly in his favor. The walls of Zara's world collapsed in that quiet, empty hallway. Outside, guests were waiting for her, believing this was a joyous day. Her parents, relatives, and friends had traveled far to celebrate. She had been so full of hope. Now everything had turned upside down by this ugly truth. The man she trusted was a liar, a racist, and he had planned this all along. Her breath came in short gasps as she knew she had to get away before someone saw her. She looked down at the simple white satin of her wedding gown. It suddenly felt like a costume. The thought of wearing it for a man who saw her as nothing more than a pawn made her sick. Tears streamed down her face as she turned and slipped down the hallway, her footsteps soft but frantic. The words she had overheard echoed in her mind so loudly that she thought she might lose herself. She pulled off her veil, let it fall to the floor, and kept walking. Her heart pounded as if ready to burst. Every part of her wanted to scream, to confront him right there, but she knew she had to stay calm. She needed to leave, to gather herself, to figure out what she would do next. Zara had believed in love since she was a little girl. Growing up, she often watched romantic movies with her mother, where the hero would sweep the heroine off her feet and promise to stay by her side forever. She loved those stories, but she was also aware of the world around her. She had faced racism in school, endured name-calling, and experienced cold stares from people who thought she did not belong. Through it all, her mother told her that one day she would meet someone who saw her worth, who cherished her for who she was. Zara clung to that hope. Then she met Stephen, the man everyone said was such a catch. They met by chance at a friend's birthday party 2 years earlier. At first, she wasn't sure if his polite smiles and kind words were just courtesy or genuine interest, but he was charming and seemed to say all the right things. He listened to her stories about her family, asked questions about her culture, and even tried some of her mother's home-cooked meals. Zara's family welcomed him with cautious optimism. Her father remained quiet during their first interactions, but her mother spoke with warm curiosity, though there was always a hint of worry in the air. The family hoped this time might be different, that this man might truly embrace them. The next 2 years passed in a blur of laughter and shared moments. Stephen proposed in a small restaurant, in front of a few close friends. He held out a simple ring and said, "I want us to build a life together. I love you, Zara." She believed him because he looked sincere. She said yes, tears of joy shining in her eyes. When they kissed, the entire restaurant cheered. Though there were small red flags, offhand comments he made that felt off, strange looks he gave her father's old shoes, or the way he grumbled when her mother spoke in her native language, Zara convinced herself it was normal. She thought all relationships had issues to work through. Whenever something bothered her, Stephen would assure her that he loved her no matter what. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly that she overlooked what her heart told her. Her heart whispered that he never truly listened, never truly empathized. She told herself she was being paranoid. When wedding preparations began, Zara was too busy to reflect on these doubts. There were dress fittings, venue visits, and menu tastings, all with Stephen's help. He insisted on booking the most expensive hall in town, wanting an elegant reception. Zara was touched, thinking he wanted her to feel like a princess on their special day. She did not see the hidden motive, that this extravagant display might impress his boss. He never told her that his boss had strong connections in the community, especially with charities and outreach programs that helped families like hers. He never mentioned that he hoped to gain favor through their interracial marriage. She had no idea that to him, their wedding was an opportunity. As the big day drew closer, small tensions grew. Stephen's mother, Diane, sometimes refused to greet Zara's parents. She would stay on her side of the room, arms folded, wearing a tight-lipped smile. Stephen told Zara to ignore his mother's behavior, claiming she was nervous and just needed time to warm up, but it bothered Zara. She tried to talk to him about how important it was for both families to come together. Stephen only shrugged. "It's just one day," he said. "They'll get over it." Then there was a time when Zara's aunt, who spoke limited English, came to see the wedding decorations in the church. Stephen caught her in the hallway, tried to explain a detail, and grew visibly frustrated when she didn't understand him. Later, he snapped at Zara. "Can't your family at least learn enough English to follow directions? They're making everything harder." Zara stared at him in shock and sadness. She told him not to speak about her family that way, and he apologized, but it felt forced. That was the first time she truly sensed the darkness inside him. But she wanted to see the best in him. Love can make you blind sometimes. The night before the wedding, Zara had trouble sleeping. She felt a knot in her stomach, but she told herself it was just nerves. She prayed, reminding herself of all the good moments they had shared. But in the morning, as she dressed in her bridal suite, the feeling returned stronger than before. She brushed it aside, focusing on adjusting her veil and smoothing out her dress. The bridesmaids fussed over her, praising her beauty. Her mother kissed her forehead, telling her how proud she was. Zara swallowed her doubts and told herself, "This is going to be okay. Stephen loves me. He chose me." Yet everything changed in that hallway, behind that door. In the worst possible way, she found out the truth. All at once, the illusion she held dear shattered. He did not see her as equal. He did not value her culture or her family. Worst of all, he had planned this all along. Zara had never imagined her wedding day would end like this. She had discovered the painful truth. Her fiancé had only planned to use their marriage as a way to rise in his career, wanting to appear progressive while secretly despising her background. The sting of his words echoed in her mind as she fled, rushing out the back door of the church, tears streaking her cheeks. She couldn't face the crowd of guests gathered out front. She couldn't let them see her like this. Her wedding planner, a kind woman named Lucy, spotted her hurrying out and called after her, "Zara, you're supposed to wait for your entrance photos." But Zara didn't respond. She vanished into the parking lot, heading toward the edge of the church grounds, where tall trees cast cool shadows across the grass. Her heart pounded, her steps unsteady as she stumbled toward a side gate, pushing it open with trembling hands. As she stepped onto the sidewalk behind the church, startled onlookers stared at her. A bride in full wedding attire, tears streaming down her face, was not something they saw every day. But Zara had no idea where to go. She only knew she needed to get as far away from that building, filled with lies, as possible. Reaching into the small pocket sewn into her wedding dress, a practical addition her mother had insisted on, she pulled out her phone and called her closest cousin, Amara, who was waiting inside among the guests. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her voice. "Amara," she said, I need you to meet me in the back parking lot, near the tall oak trees. Please come alone." Amara's voice was edged with alarm. "Zara, what's going on? Everyone's wondering where you are. The ceremony is supposed to start soon." "Please," Zara said, her voice cracking. "Just come. I'll explain then." She ended the call. A few minutes later, Amara arrived, panting, her heels clicking against the pavement. She found Zara near a hedge, still crying. When Zara told her what she had overheard, Amara's eyes widened in horror. "How could he say that?" she whispered, her voice shaking with anger. "After everything you shared with him," Zara sobbed. "He doesn't love me. He never did. It was all a stunt for his career. And he hates my family, Amara. He hates who we are. What do I do?" Amara held her cousin tight, feeling her tremble. "We can leave right now," she said. "You don't have to go through with any of this. We can make up an excuse or just let them figure it out. You don't owe him anything." Zara shook her head. "Everyone is here, my parents, my grandparents. They came such a long way. How can I just walk away without explaining? But if I go inside now, I don't trust myself not to scream at him in front of everyone." Amara looked at her with fierce loyalty. "You have every right to confront him. He deserves it. But do you really want to do that here, today, with all these people watching?" Zara wiped her eyes, thinking hard. "It can't happen like this. I need to collect myself. He wants to humiliate me for his gain, but I won't let him. He's used me for months. I can't just run off and hide. That's what he'd expect me to do. Be the docile bride who doesn't cause trouble." Amara stroked Zara's hand. "What are you going to do?" Zara felt a new wave of resolve course through her. Rage, mixed with heartbreak and a sense of justice, flared inside her. "I'm going to leave for now. Let them panic. Let him wonder if I overheard him. Then, when the time is right, I'll come back. And I won't come back alone. He wants to see me broken. Let's see how he handles it when I stand up for myself." Her eyes glinted with determination. She needed to gather proof, gather her thoughts, and return at the exact moment that would expose him. She would not be a victim of his cruelty. Zara and Amara hurried away from the church grounds, walking down a few blocks until they found a small, family-run cafe. The place was nearly empty, most people busy with weekend errands. Zara hesitated. Walking into a cafe in a wedding dress would surely attract attention, but she needed somewhere to sit, to think, and to hide. They slipped inside and found a corner table. The owner, an older woman with a gentle accent, approached, concern evident in her eyes. "My dear, is everything okay? Do you need help?" she asked softly. Zara tried to smile, grateful for her kindness. I just need somewhere to rest for a moment," she said, her voice husky with emotion. "May I please have a glass of water?" The woman nodded and left quickly, returning with water and a cup of tea on a small tray. "No charge," she said kindly. "I hope you find peace. I don't know what's happened, but I can see pain in your eyes." Zara sipped her water, her mind whirling. Should she call her parents first? Should she expose Stephen now? Her hands shook as she handed her phone to Amara, who texted Zara's parents, telling them she needed a moment to calm down before the ceremony. They quickly replied, worried but willing to wait. Zara closed her eyes, thankful for their unconditional love. For nearly an hour, The cousins huddled close, whispering. Zara's shock slowly gave way to fiery determination. She knew what she wanted: to return to the wedding, to show up when Stephen least expected it, and to expose him in front of everyone. But she needed to be calm, organized. Most importantly, she wanted to shield her family from the worst of the fallout. Amara agreed. We can't let him continue pretending, not when his cruelty is so clear. But how? Zara asked, brow furrowed. I have no recordings, no proof. It's just my word against his. Amara smiled, tapping her phone. Most of us have apps that record audio, right? I can try to get him to admit what he said, or we can trick him into repeating it. Zara's blood boiled at the memory of his words. We need him to reveal how he really feels, she said. He might get careless if we push the right buttons. Then everyone will see who he truly is. They laid out a plan. Zara would stay hidden, letting worry spread through the wedding guests. Meanwhile, Amara would return to the venue and pretend to sympathize with Stephen, suggesting Zara had run off due to cold feet or insecurities about his family's approval. She would get him alone, get him to talk, and secretly record their conversation. If they succeeded, they'd have the evidence they needed. Zara shuddered. Hearing it once was bad enough, she whispered. But I need everyone else to hear it too. Amara nodded. I'll do it, Zara. You can trust me. With a final hug, Amara left the cafe, heading back to the church. Zara watched her go, feeling a mix of fear and hope. If Amara could do this, Zara would return with the strength to stand up for herself and her family. She nursed her tea, feeling the minutes drag on. Occasionally, the cafe owner passed by and offered a kind smile. Zara dabbed away streaks of mascara from her cheeks. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. We are worried. Ceremony is delayed. Stephen says you are unwell. Where are you? Zara's heart twisted. She knew she should speak to her parents directly, but she needed to stick to the plan. She quickly typed, I'm safe, Mom. Don't worry. I just need some air. She set her phone face down on the table and took a deep breath. She reminded herself why she was doing this. She thought of Stephen's smug voice, the laughter he shared with his friend, the cruel words he had spoken. She imagined her family's faces if they ever heard the truth. Her father, a proud man who had sacrificed so much, and her mother, who had welcomed Stephen with open arms, didn't deserve such betrayal. That steeled her resolve. She was not going to let Stephen fool them any longer. Here's the paragraph version of your text. Underscore 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 underscore. That might have pushed her over the edge. Stephen stared at her. He knew better than to confess, but part of him believed there was no way Zara would bring this out in public. He had counted on her meekness, on her desire to keep the peace. I don't think so, he lied. We might have joked around a bit, but she knows I love her. Amara nodded, pretending to accept his words. Her phone, hidden in her purse, was recording everything. Sometimes jokes can hurt if they have a hint of truth, she said carefully. Did you ever say something about her family not being good enough for yours? Or that you're only doing this wedding for some reason other than love? Stephen tensed. Why would you suggest that? He asked sharply. I'm marrying her because I love her. That's the only reason. Amara smiled apologetically. Sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that she ran away, so I'm trying to figure out if something you said triggered it. He looked away, clearly annoyed. He was not about to spill his secrets to Zara's cousin. She'll come back, he finally said in a low voice. She always does what's best for everyone else. She wouldn't dare embarrass her family by leaving. In that moment, Amara sensed the ugly truth behind his arrogance. Her stomach twisted in disgust, but she pretended to give him a nod of sympathy. I'm sure you're right, she said quietly. I'll see if I can find her. Maybe she just needed some air. She walked away, not pressing further. If she pushed too hard, he would suspect something. The few words he had said, laced with superiority and dismissiveness, were enough to show his true colors. She wasn't sure if it would be enough to shock everyone, but it was a start. Slipping into a side room, Amara turned off the recording and listened back. She heard Stephen's harsh tone, how he labeled Zara as dramatic, how he suggested she was bound by duty to her family's honor. It was enough to show that he saw her in a belittling light, but it was not the full confession they wanted. Amara sent a quick text to Zara. He hasn't confessed much yet, but I have some of his nasty tone on tape. I can keep trying if you want, or we can think of another plan. Zara's reply came soon after. Thank you. Let me think. I might have another idea. Wait a little longer. I'll let you know when I'm coming back. In the cafe, Zara paced by the window, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She thought about the look in Stephen's eyes when they first met. Had she always been a target for him, or had he once cared and then changed? She would never truly know. The only thing she knew now was that he was not the man she thought he was. She typed a text to her mother, letting her know she was safe. Her mother insisted on coming to her side. Zara hesitated, but realized she needed the support. She gave her mother the address of the cafe and told her to come quietly, without alerting everyone else. 20 minutes later, Zara's mother arrived, worry etched across her face. She wore a simple navy blue dress and a soft pink headscarf that framed her kind features. The moment she saw her daughter in the wedding dress, she burst into tears. Zara embraced her, drawing strength from that hug. Zara, what happened? Her mother asked, voice trembling. Why is the ceremony on hold? Everyone's whispering. Some people are leaving. Zara felt guilt and pain swell inside her. Haltingly, she explained that she had overheard Stephen saying vile things about her and her family. She did not repeat every word. Some were too painful, but she shared enough for her mother to understand the betrayal. Tears slid down her mother's cheeks. How could he pretend for so long? She whispered, shaking her head. We welcomed him. We trusted him. Zara sniffed, wiping her own tears. I'm sorry I didn't see the signs, Mom. I was so caught up in the idea of love. Her mother patted her hand softly. You have nothing to be sorry for. He is the one who has deceived us. She took a deep breath. What do you plan to do now, child? Do you still want to marry him? Zara's answer was immediate. No, I can't marry a man who sees me and my family as inferior. He doesn't love me. He doesn't respect me. It was all fake. Her mother nodded. Then you must do what is best for you. If you want to call off the wedding, we support you. Zara felt a fresh wave of tears, relief. I won't let him get away with this, she said, her jaw set with resolve. He thinks he can hide his racism and use me for his gains. I want to expose him for who he is. Her mother looked concerned. Zara, you must be careful. Men like him, if he's not afraid to say such words. He might not react well if you humiliate him in front of everyone. Zara nodded. I know, she said quietly, but I have to do this. I'll let him think I've run away for good. Then I'll walk back in there and show him I'm not weak. I will not be quiet. I don't care if it causes a scene. Her mother sighed, placing a gentle hand on Zara's cheek. I see the courage in your eyes, but promise me you won't let anger consume you. Do what you must, but do it with dignity. Zara squeezed her mother's hand. I promise. As afternoon turned to evening, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the church lawn. Some guests had left, but many lingered, hoping for an explanation. Stephen's parents hid their annoyance behind forced smiles, but they whispered angrily among themselves. Stephen grew more and more agitated. He stepped outside the church, scanned the parking lot, and paced near the entrance. He tried calling Zara's phone again, but there was no answer. Inside, Amara quietly approached the guest she trusted. She explained that Zara had discovered something horrible about Stephen, though she did not provide details. She asked him to stay, saying that Zara needed people who cared about her. Some of Zara's close friends agreed, suspecting that something terrible had happened. They were worried, but they trusted Zara's judgment. Zara used this time to call her father, who was still inside the church, seated in a pew, waiting patiently. When she heard his voice, she almost broke down again. Her father had always been the quiet strength in her life. In a choked whisper, she explained what she had overheard. Her father was silent for a long moment before speaking gently. "You do not have to marry a man who disrespects our family. I will support whatever choice you make. If you wish me to stay with you as you confront him, I will do so. If you want me to remain quiet in the background, I will do that too. But know this. I love you, Zara, and I will not allow this man to harm you." Zara's throat tightened. "Thank you, Dad. It means everything to me. Please remain where you are. I will let you know when we are about to come in. I want you by my side, but I also need to handle this myself." Her father understood and agreed. Finally, as the evening light began to fade, Zara decided it was time. She stood in front of the cafe's small bathroom mirror, splashed water on her face, and fixed her makeup the best she could. Her mother helped smooth out her wedding dress and reposition her veil. Zara looked at her reflection. The dress was a symbol of purity and hope, but now it reminded her of betrayal. Still, she would wear it for one purpose: to show Stephen and everyone else that she would not be his victim. She and her mother left the cafe and took a ride back to the church. As they approached, her heart pounded. She could see from the windows that many guests were still inside, scattered in small clusters of conversation. Some were gazing at their phones, looking bored or anxious. Stephen stood at the front, speaking to the officiant with a strained expression. Word of Zara's arrival spread quickly. People turned to look. Some gasped, others whispered. Stephen spun around, relief and anger flashing in his eyes. He rushed toward her. "Zara," he exclaimed, forcing a tight smile. "Where have you been? You had everyone worried. Are you okay?" Zara did not smile. A cold calm filled her. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Right now." In front of everyone, Zara stood frozen, her heart pounding as she stared into Stephen's eyes. "You lied to me, betrayed me, and insulted everything I hold dear," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "This wedding is off." A collective gasp rippled through the church, and the stunned silence that followed was broken only by the sharp intake of breath from Diane, Stephen's mother. Whether from shock or anger at her son's exposure, she made a strangled sound in her throat. Stephen reached for Zara's hand, desperation flashing in his eyes, but she stepped back, refusing to let him touch her. "Wait," he pleaded, the smooth, confident mask slipping from his face. "Listen, if you don't go through with this, think about how it will look. Everybody's here. Think about your family's reputation. They'll be humiliated." Zara's voice was cold and unwavering. "They won't be half as humiliated as you when they learn the truth. My family stands by me. You don't get to manipulate me anymore. You are the one who should be ashamed." Stephen's face hardened and his tone turned bitter. "Fine. If you walk away, don't expect me to apologize. You'll never find someone better than me. At least I gave you a chance at a decent life. You want to throw it all away? Go ahead." A wave of outrage swept through the crowd. One of Zara's uncles stood up, glaring at Stephen. Her friends muttered curses under their breath, and even some of Stephen's own friends looked uncomfortable, realizing that he had been exposed as a bigot and a liar. The entire wedding scene had descended into chaos. Zara squared her shoulders, feeling tears burn at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not let Stephen see her cry again. With steady steps, she walked past him, straight to the altar. Behind it, a table held the wedding documents, ready to be signed. She picked them up, stared at them for a moment, then tore them in half. The ripping sound echoed in the stunned silence. "This is my wedding gift to myself," she declared, holding the torn papers for all to see. "Freedom from a man who never loved me, who never respected me. I'd rather have no wedding at all than spend my life with a racist who sees me as a tool for his own advantage. She let the torn pieces flutter to the floor, some landing at her feet. Then she turned to Stephen one last time. I hope you learned something from this, she said quietly. Hatred will only poison you. But I won't stand here and be your victim. Turning away from him, she walked down the aisle. Her father stood at the end, offering his arm, and she took it with gratitude, feeling her mother's comforting hand slip into hers on the other side. Her closest friends and family followed, giving her strength. Many guests began to walk out, appalled by Stephen's behavior. Even those who stayed behind only stared at him, shaking their heads in disappointment. This was Zara's moment of revenge. Not through violence, but through a firm stand. She had exposed Stephen before everyone he sought to impress. She had torn up the wedding contract in front of them. She had refused to be silenced or shamed. Now, all that was left was for Stephen to face the consequences of his own words. Outside the church, dusk had settled, the warm glow of streetlights reflecting off Zara's tear-streaked cheeks. Despite her sadness, she felt an odd sense of relief. Her friends and cousins gathered around her, hugging her and telling her how proud they were of her courage. Some wept for her pain, while others raged at Stephen's cruelty. Zara looked at her mother and father, who stood together, their arms wrapped around her. She felt their love surround her like a shield. She knew the days ahead would be difficult. There would be questions, rumors, and perhaps attempts by Stephen to salvage his reputation, but none of that mattered now. She was free from a loveless marriage and a bigoted partner. She had reclaimed her dignity. One by one, the cars of the guests left the church parking lot. Some family members offered to host a small gathering at a relative's home, a place where they could sit with Zara and make sure she was okay. She agreed. She didn't want to be alone that night. She wanted to be surrounded by people who cared, who saw her worth, who knew the value of a loving heart. As she walked to her parents' car, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Turning, she saw Lucy, the wedding planner, her eyes full of sympathy. Zara, I'm so sorry things turned out this way, Lucy said, her voice heavy with regret. But I respect how you handled it. It was brave. Zara gave a small, grateful nod. Thank you, Lucy. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but I had to stand up for myself. Lucy handed her a small bouquet of white lilies. I think you deserve these, she said softly. They were meant for the altar, but it seems right that you should have them. Zara accepted the flowers, pressing them to her chest. Thank you, she whispered. The night air felt cool against her face as she climbed into her parents' car. She stared out the window at the church doors, still open, revealing glimpses of the shattered ceremony inside. She thought of Stephen, left behind with his lies exposed. She thought of all the ways her future had changed in just a single day. And though her heart ached, she also felt a sense of hope. Sometimes, breaking away from something fake clears the path for something true. They drove away, her mother and father silent but comforting. Zara knew the journey ahead would be filled with challenges. She would have to deal with the emotional fallout. She would have to explain to relatives and friends who weren't there what really happened. But she would do so with her head held high. She had shown that she would not tolerate hate, even from someone who claimed to love her. When they arrived at her cousin's house, she was greeted by a small crowd of relatives and close friends. They wrapped her in blankets, gave her tea, and let her cry in safety. Some told her stories to make her laugh, reminding her she was still capable of joy. Others simply sat beside her, offering quiet support. It was a strange sort of after-party, one filled not with wedding toasts, but with heartfelt sympathy and a shared resolve to protect her. Late into the night, as people began to drift away, Zara stepped outside to the small back porch. She looked at the moon glowing in the sky and felt a tear slip down her cheek. She let it fall. She felt pain, but also relief. She heard the door open behind her. Turning, she saw her father. He walked over and stood beside her. They didn't speak for a while, just looked at the stars. Finally, he said softly, You did the right thing." Zara bowed her head. "It hurts," she admitted, "but I know it was right. I just feel foolish for loving him." Her father placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Love is not foolish. Trusting someone is not foolish. He is the one who was foolish for throwing away a good woman's heart." Zara closed her eyes, tears slipping onto her lashes. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. They stayed together under the night sky a little longer, the quiet of the neighborhood wrapping around them. As Zara breathed in the cool air, she vowed she would heal. She would move on, and she would not let Stephen's hateful words define her. She had faced him and taken her revenge, not through cruelty, but by revealing who he truly was. In time, she would find her own peace, and perhaps one day, true love as well.